Everybody, this is just a reminder. You can follow us on all social media platforms: Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. All you have to do is search at Failing One Justice. That is the at sign, failing the number one justice on all social media platforms. You can also find us on the web at www.thisisfailingjustice.com.
This is Failing Justice.
Thank you for joining us today. I am your host, Justin Carlson. I want to introduce to you someone who, through misdeed and malfeasant behavior of public officials, has become a dear friend of mine. She is a nurse. She's a mother. She's a good woman. She's a citizen of Palestine, Texas, which is the city that I worked for as a police officer and detective for many years. We are here to talk about her son's case. I want to introduce her, and I want her to speak a little bit about herself. Her name is Nitra Evans. Nitra, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Justin. Hello, my name is Shanitra Evans, aka Nitra Evans, and I am the mother of Paul Anthony Barksdale Jr., who is now incarcerated in Childress, Texas, at the Roach Unit, serving a concurrently 25-year sentence.
Nitra, tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, where you live, your career path. I know you've had a career path that you did for roughly 20 years. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. My mom moved us to Texas from Los Angeles, California when I was a small little girl. I was raised in a small community, Fairfield, Texas, probably about 45 minutes from Palestine, Texas. I moved to Palestine, Texas, roughly around the end of the 90s, and I became established in Palestine. I worked at a local doctor's office for a voted number one doctor. And I choose not to say his name at this time, but I worked for him for 18 years. I became very established there. And I lost that job after being terminated over Black Lives Matter in 2020. We purchased a home in 2004, and that is the home that Paul was raised in. We've lived in other areas in Palestine, but that is where I became established, and we are still located in that area.
And you mentioned your son, Paul. I know Paul. We're talking about Paul Barksdale Jr., right? That's your son. Tell us a little bit about Paul, how old he is, kind of his background and school and his trajectory of where he was headed. And just tell us a little bit about Paul.
Paul is now 29 years old. He turned 29 November the 21st of 2022. He was 27 years old when he was incarcerated concerning these charges that we will later discuss. Paul is my oldest son of three sons. I have 4 biological children of my own, 5 with a stepdaughter. And so he was the oldest. The girls are older, but he is the older boy. Paul was always the picker, as what the family calls him, because he's the kid that always kept some type of activity going. But when it came to school, he was an athlete. He carried his team through many championships in Palestine. And I say championships, I mean games. Like when Paul was in school, Palestine had a very well-known reputation, and he was one of the leading athletes. He gained a scholarship to Athens, Texas for football, where he received a championship ring his first year, and he did well in school. His first year, his grades skyrocketed, and he was just a very well-known person. In fact, in college, he went from being called PJ to Bam, and that was his nickname. And so he was just an athlete, and he left home quickly after graduating from high school and went off to college. Now, in Athens, Athens is not far from Palestine, but they have a very well-known reputation for their athletic department.
All right, so his name's Paul, but I think we'll just refer to him as PJ throughout the rest of this interview, just simply because that's kind of how I've come to know him through you, as PJ. Now, let's talk about kind of where I first came in contact with PJ, which is really, kind of when things started going downhill. We'll take it all the way back to Saturday, October 5th of 2019. I was a major crimes detective working at Palestine Police Department. I worked homicides, major shootings, major investigations to do with children, and that was kind of my thing. And so I got a call on October 5th, 2019, that there was a shooting on Howard Street in Palestine. All I knew at the time was that they said a kid had been shot. There were a couple witnesses on scene, and that I needed to respond. So I responded. I made my first contact. I made with Officer Tanner Grantham, who no longer works at Palestine Police Department, but Officer Grantham told me that there was a shooting on Howard Street, and that there was a witness by the name of Marquez Dawson. Marquez Dawson said that him and another boy by the name of Angela Loaiza went to this house on Howard Street, and their intention was to purchase a firearm from a guy named Leon Owens. So they went to the house to purchase the firearm. According to Dawson's statement at the time, he had provided Leon Owens with $60 cash, and Loaiza gave Owens $200 cash. Dawson said that Owens then pointed the firearm at Loaiza, and that Loaiza began to fight with Owens. And so Dawson said that he got into physical altercation with Barksdale and Lopez. Now, Barksdale being your son PJ, he claims that he and PJ got into a fight. He said after the short tussle that they had, that the trigger on the gun was pulled, and that Loaiza got shot in the face. According to Dawson, he says Owens, Lopez, and PJ all fled the location right after the shooting. Dawson says he's the only one that remained on scene to give aid to Loaiza. Now, Loaiza he got shot in the eye, but he lived, and he lived to tell the story. So, and I was able to talk to him, and during my conversation with Loaiza, he did indicate that PJ was there, but that PJ was in the back room and that he was asleep. And when everything started to break out, PJ came out of the back room and was like, "Hey, what's going on?" According to the victim, Loaiza, who got shot in the face, he stated that PJ was defending him against the other guys who was trying to take his belongings, trying to take his bag. So here we have the victim who got shot in the face, who lived to tell the story, who says, "Hey, PJ was there, but he was the only one defending me against these other guys." So then So then not only did um, the victim say that PJ was trying to defend him, PJ actually came to the police department on his own free will, and you came with him. Nitra, you came with him, and that's when you guys first met me. Now, tell me a little bit about that encounter that you first had with me, not knowing me, being in a police department, um, your son's being accused of being at a shooting scene. Kind of tell me why you guys came and what was what made you guys talk to me to come tell your story.
As you stated, the rumor came, well, to us, it was a rumor at first. I actually believe I had company the day that we found out there had been a shooting in Palestine. So, the young lady that was at my house, she called around and somebody said that PJ was there. So PJ did not have a cell phone at the time. So at that day, I couldn't get in touch with them until later. And I sent word out on the streets. Hey, somebody was shot last night. PJ needs to get in touch with me. So when Paul made contact with me, I told him that there had been a shooting. He was aware there had been a shooting, but he was not sure if the young fellow had passed or what. So we kind of laid low for a couple of days until we wanted to know if it was true. And so on Tuesday, October the 8th, we received a phone call on my job from Officer Wilson. And he was stating, actually, I received a phone call first from Therese White. And she told me that she knew Officer Wilson, that they were friends, and that he was trying to get in touch with PJ about a shooting. So once we received that, I was like, well, if Officer Wilson is wanting to speak to Paul, he needs to make contact. So he called my job. He made contact, told me that PJ had been involved in the shooting and they just wanted to do questioning. We came down to the police station on Tuesday, October the 8th, and that's where you and I met with Paul. And you were very friendly. You allowed for me to come to the, I call it interrogation room, where.
And that's going back to that. That's typically we don't allow that. We don't allow other people to bring their family members in. But just off of going back to Wilson, based off of what Wilson was telling me, I'd heard y'all's conversation, and you guys were willing to come in, and so I was like, hey, if he's going to come in and he's going to talk about what happened, and you want to join him, why not? Why not let that happen? And so I was totally cool with that. I was just when you're in a position like that, obviously things you hear, you just never know what you're getting yourself into. And, I thought it was really cool that you guys came in and talked to me because, I read PJ's rights, which I was supposed to do. I said, hey, you're here to talk to me. You're here on your own free will. Are you willing to do that? And he said, yeah. And so then we had a conversation. So, how did you feel and how did PJ feel about that?
Well, when we left, actually, during the interrogation, every question we felt like was covered that needed to be covered. You all asked what happened that day. He was very sincere. He told you everything like you stated earlier. He was in the back. He was asleep. He was woke up to gun shots. He ran out of the room. He did not get into a fight with Mr. Dawson. He did try to help. From what I understand, he tried to help the young guy that had been shot. But Lopez and Paul, he left. He went his own way. And so that day we felt comfortable. We felt like it was no reason for us to lie about anything. And I say us, I was there more because I feel like you should always have a witness. And with the history from Palestine Police Department and their reputation, we did not trust to just come down to the police station without someone being present with Paul.
So yeah, you you talk about the history of Palestine Police Department. I mean, I worked there, and even I knew the history. We had gone through, since when I started working there in 2010, we had gone through from 2010 all the way up to this point, 2019, somewhere in the range between 6 to 8 chiefs, and constant turnaround. People just posting things on the internet, bad things happening, and I mean, I was aware of this, and so I knew that you guys were, a little skeptical, but y'all were doing the right thing and coming in and talking about it, and knowing me now, as opposed to then, how genuine I am, and at the time, of course, you didn't know that, but you guys still came in. Now, I was obviously recording the conversation with the PPD equipment, in our interview room, the equipment that was provided. It was activated, it was on, it was recorded, following everything that I was supposed to follow. Now, it came out later that obviously not only was I recording, but that you were recording. Tell me how you were recording, and kind of what your thought process was, because I didn't know. I had no idea you were recording. But tell me kind of why you decided to do that, and why you thought it was a good idea.
Well, for one, I did not like how Officer Wilson called another citizen to get in touch with me and my son concerning the shooting. And I say he involved me because he called my job. And so whenever we had the interrogation, we left on the strength that Paul had nothing to do with this, and that basically he was going to be cleared because the young fellow did not know anything about Paul. So later, when I received the call, I just decided, you know what, we better start recording and see what's being said, what the other people are being said, because at this point, we don't know what's going to happen. And again, Palestine, Texas does not have a good reputation of the crimes committed in Anderson County.
So did you come in recording? Like when you came in, did you already have your camera activated, or did you do it at some point during the interview?
I actually did not record the day of the interview when Paul came into the interrogation room. I recorded a phone call because it was like after he was interrogated on the 9th, then the phone call started from the police station. So I actually recorded our phone conversation, and this is the first time you heard me say that.
So you and I had numerous conversations over the phone, because there were things that were coming up. I had went and talked to Leon Owens because he was in jail. We had got a warrant for him because Marquez Dawson was the witness, and he identified Owens as the one being there and the one who did the shooting. So I got an arrest warrant for Owens, and he was picked up and arrested and taken to the jail. So after I talked to PJ, I had went and talked to Owens, to Leon, and Leon Owens was telling me, like, hey, because I asked him where the gun was. He said, well, PJ took the gun. PJ took the gun. He kept on this whole thing about PJ took the gun. So that sparked phone calls, me calling you, and talking to you and PJ at the same time. So you're saying that those conversations were the ones that were recorded, right?
Correct.
Okay, so during those conversations, and we're gonna play the recording. We'll play the recording here in just a bit, but the recording, I remember the conversation distinctly because, number one, I'd already talked to the victim. Victim said, "Hey, yeah, PJ, he was defending me. He was there, wrong place, wrong time kind of situation. He was there, but he was defending me." Then I had PJ come in on his own free will, willing to talk to me. And I mean, it was obvious during that interview that, he, I mean, he was sincere. Like he was, slamming his fists together, saying, "Man, I swear, like polygraph me, do whatever you got to do." And tears even started coming down his eyes at one point because I mean, I think he was deathly afraid of what might come. So after I talked to Leon Owens, and he was saying he said that PJ had the gun. Obviously, I would have to call you guys to vet that information. So when I called you, I remember pretty distinctly, but one of those phone conversations was pretty key. And so tell me about that phone conversation and what was said and what's on the recording, and then I'll talk about it also.
Well, during this phone conversation, you were very consistent in finding the weapon that was used to shoot the individual. And so Leon had stated that Paul had taken the gun from the premises. So you were basically just stating to PJ, if later it comes up and you have this gun, we're going to charge you. But we know you were asleep. The witness has said that you didn't have anything to do with it. And so I was recording because the stories had started changing. Of course, you were doing your job. You had to go with what you were hearing. Even though Paul was brought in, he came in willingly. He did not seem to be nervous. He insisted on having polygraph testing. Even though Paul wanted to do all those things, you still had other individuals that were involved in this incident. So at that point, red flags started coming because the stories began to change drastically. So I decided to record the phone conversations. And my whole point was to get you or one of the people stating that Paul had nothing to do with this shooting.
So in the conversation, did at any point I tell Paul that as long as he had nothing to do with it and he didn't have the gun, I believe the fact that he was asleep. I believed his story, and I believed the victim's story. So did at any point I tell Paul, hey, or you, I'm not going to charge you. You don't have anything to worry about as long as you're telling me the truth?
You told Paul, okay, Paul, I'm trusting you. But if later this gun comes up and I find out you were lying or you had anything to do with this shooting, I will come back and arrest you. And so basically, after that date in October, we did not hear anything else from you concerning that case until approximately almost 6 months later.
All right. So my case, as far as the police department side, was closed at that point. I finished the investigation. I wrote my report, and that report submitted to the investigation secretary, who then submits those cases to the district attorney's office. And you have a copy of the report. I have a copy of the report that I wrote. And nowhere in that report do I ever implicate PJ as getting in any kind of altercation. The only time PJ was mentioned about being in an altercation was from Marquez. But nowhere did I indicate that we found out that was true. And so the report was sent over listing Leon Owens as the primary suspect. He'd already been arrested. He's already sitting in jail. And I'm trying to remember. I think Leon had already been involved in some other sort of robbery prior to that, and so he was suspect in multiple cases, and so that was my conclusion. My conclusion was PJ's telling the truth. You have a victim saying that he wasn't involved. You have PJ saying that he wasn't involved, and I had no proof, no evidence, nothing indicating that he was involved. So that's why you guys didn't hear anything, because I sent the case over to the Anderson County District Attorney's Office with Leon Owens as the person the primary and only suspect for indictment. And so let's fast forward from that point. The last time we spoke on the phone, you had a recording of me. Let's fast forward all the way up to March 22nd of 2020. 6 months later. Tell me what happened that day.
Well, to my understanding, Paul and a couple of his friends were joyriding in a friend's car. The car ended up being later identified as the guy's father's car. Well, I guess I don't know how it happened, but back and forth, they wanted the car, he wanted the car, whatever. Dad reported the car stolen because he's stating the son had no permission. Police pull up on Paul and Giovanni Lopez at Willie Myers Park in the car. This is March the 22nd of 2020. So they tell Paul, hey, this car is stolen. Paul is arrested and he is taken to jail. Probably about an hour after they book him in, I receive a phone call from Paul screaming and hollering, stating that he was not only in jail for a stolen car, which those charges were later dropped, but now he's in jail for aggravated robbery, causing bodily injury.
And does this conversation take place late at night or early in the morning?
This is probably mid-afternoon, around 7, 8 o'clock p.m.
Okay, so when you got that information, what did you do next? Did you contact authorities, the district attorney's office, the police department? What did you do?
Well, I sat on it for a couple of days trying to gather everything and like what robbery was it, because never did it cross my mind that it was the robbery from October of 2019. So whenever I found out that it was the same incident, I pulled out the recording and I personally sent it to Allison Mitchell through Facebook Messenger.
Okay, so when you sent her that recording, did you end up getting on the phone with her? What kind of conversation did you have, or did you have?
Yes, she replied back and she was like, wow, I needed to contact Brian Walsh, which is Paul's court-appointed attorney for other charges. And so she stated that she would have someone call me. We were going to meet at first, and then she told me she couldn't. So I met later with Chief Harcrow concerning the incident.
Do you happen to remember that date, or was it just a couple of days after this had happened?
I don't actually remember the exact date, but it was a couple of days after I sent the recording to Allison Mitchell.
All right, so you said Chief Harcrow. We're talking about Chief Mark Harcrow, who is the current police chief of Palestine Police Department. When you met with him, tell me about that. Was it in person, and how did that conversation go?
Yes, I met with him in person in his office, just myself and Mark Harcrow. He stated to me that Allison Mitchell had made contact with him, and he stated that I had actually given up some information that they were not aware of. He stated that he would be doing an investigation, and that if you reported that on my son, that he was sorry, and that they would fix it, because he sure didn't want my son sitting in jail on charges that he had nothing to do with, but that he was going to pull your file concerning that day back in 2019. So he just told me, we'll investigate it, you'll hear back from us, and I waited.
All right, so let's talk about that day. That very same day, Mark Harcrow came to my office, and it, very nonchalantly, if anybody knows Mark Harcrow, he's he's usually pretty pretty candid, pretty crass. He's just kind of blunt. And so he came in my office and he said, "Hey, what's going on with this robbery on Paul Barksdale?" And I work a lot of cases. Like I've every any murder case, any major case, and there was a lot of them in Palestine that took place, I was somehow involved in. And obviously I knew the name when he said, "Hey, what's going on with this case with Paul Barksdale?" I knew the name. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. So he's like, the shooting that happened back in October. And I was like, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, I sent it to the DA's office. What do you mean what's going on with it? I don't have it anymore. It's over there." He said, "Well, his mom just left my office and she's pissed off because he's been charged with aggravated robbery." And immediately I knew. I said, "Well, that's not accurate." I said, "Because he didn't have anything to do with that." That was my immediate response because I at least knew that much. And he said, "Well, you need to call Allison, and you need to deal with it." Allison is Allison Mitchell. She is the head DA at the Anderson County District Attorney's Office. So I picked up the phone and I called Allison. And this conversation is no telling where at this point, into the abyss of the unknown. But I called Allison, and from my phone, from my police department phone, the landline, she was on speaker. Scott Holden, which is the first assistant DA, right under Allison Mitchell, he was also in the room with her, and it was a very heated conversation. She wasn't happy. She asked me, "Why in the world why would you have a recording of me telling PJ that he wasn't going to be charged?" And I said, "Well, I don't know exactly what recording you're talking about, but I said, obviously my intention was to never charge PJ. And if you guys would have opened up the report and read it, you can clearly see that nowhere in this incident does it say that PJ was involved. So, that's why that's why she would have that recording, because I told them that they didn't have anything to worry about unless I came up with something later that clearly involved Paul." And she said, "Well, I'm the final say so in whether somebody gets charged and indicted, and you should have ran this past me." And I said, "Allison, I said there was no need. He wasn't involved." And then Scott Holden popped in and he said, "Well, he was there, wasn't he?" And I said, "Well, yeah, he was there." I said, "But somebody's mere presence doesn't necessarily mean that they should be indicted for a felony aggravated robbery whenever you have a." And I reminded them, it was almost as if they didn't read the report. I said, "The victim said Paul was defending him. Paul said he was defending him." And I said, "If you read the report, nowhere in there is Paul listed as a suspect." Well, she was not happy. Scott Holden was not happy. And so I hung up the phone and I went back to Mark Harkrow, and I said, "Hey," I said, "they're pissed off." I was just kind of shocked, really. I was just like, I don't understand why this is going on. He said, "Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it." I said, "Well, hey," I said, if I need to call his mom and smooth things over with her, and he's like, no, we me and Allison will take care of that." Okay. So, I moved on. And I didn't hear anything else about this. That was the last I'd heard about that case until February of 2022. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Kind of how that came about, almost 2 years later. But tell me, what was the process after you had made your complaint with Mark Harcrow and Allison Mitchell, how long did it take for that charge to get dropped? Kind of, did they tell you they were going to drop it? Did they send you paperwork? And I see you have some paperwork here, so if you want to read directly off of that, that's fine. You have the legal paperwork here. So tell me what that process was after you had talked to them.
Well, after I met with Mark Harcrow, I received a text message probably maybe 2 days later. It came through my phone, and it was an actual copy of this letter here. And it is a motion to dismiss. And it was from the Honorable Judge and said court. So this actually stated that the aggravated robbery was going to be dismissed because the investigating officer, which was you, had requested that this case be dismissed after it was submitted to the office for intake and grand jury. So I saw Allison Mitchell. I will not say where I saw her at, but she tapped me on my shoulder and she was like, hey girl, did they tell you what I did? And I was like, yeah. Thank you. And she said, girl, we will not have that. We will not have that type of behavior from our officials. So basically, Harcrow and Allison Mitchell put it on you that Paul was ever arrested for this charge.
So how long was he sitting in jail? Because this was an indictment, so that means it was a grand jury indictment, so that means it was a warrant. He went going back to that night. He was arrested. He was arrested allegedly for being in a stolen car. They dropped the stolen car charge because that was, just a he said, she said. Somebody has the car. Somebody let somebody else borrow the car, and they didn't know that they had the car, and then that person let somebody else borrow the car. So that was just a big convoluted mess. But then that's when you found out about this. So how long did Paul sit in on this particular charge? Like, how long did it take him to drop it?
I want to state, and it's crazy because this letter, if you notice, they did not put a date on it. So this was never dated. It is signed by Allison Mitchell, but never dated. So I want to say, and don't quote me, I want to say he said in jail on the aggravated robbery about 6 months. And we went to Cargill. We paid him to represent Paul, and he never represented Paul. We ended up being with Brian Walsh, who is a court-appointed attorney that later stated he did not even want to represent Paul concerning all of this.
Now, you said Cargill. Who's Cargill?
Mark Cargill is, I want to say, one of the leading attorneys in Palestine, Texas, but he's an attorney that we pay to represent my son, and he never represented him.
So, give or take, approximately, we're not concreting a number here, but approximately 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 weeks on an aggravated robbery charge that should have never been an indictment in the first place. So, going back to when I didn't hear about this case again. This was, March of 2020, kind of right in the height of COVID. I think that's kind of when COVID first started. I continued to work for Palestine Police Department for another year and 4 months because I left. I left in June of 2021. I left because I wanted to leave. Things were not good. We can get into that. We probably will get into that in later episodes, but I left because I wanted to leave. And so I went and started a business, and I'm living my life. So fast forward to February of 2022. And I can't remember exactly where or how, but I do remember maybe you were doing a live on Facebook or made a post. Somebody had sent it to me, and you were talking about this case. Now, keep in mind, I knew that obviously he had been indicted a year and a half before, but I never heard anything else. Mark said him and Allison will take care of it. I asked to call you. He said no. And so I just assumed, that they had handled the situation. And I worked so many cases, I never heard anything else up until February of 2022. And I think you were just kind of recapping about something because Paul had another issue, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And I think that sparked, your memory because Paul had been done wrong, and he was currently being done wrong. And so I saw this on social media, and when I saw it, I was like, I didn't know if they had dropped the charge. Like I said, I didn't know anything about it. But I did see that you were saying that I had railroaded Paul. Now, obviously, you not knowing the situation, you didn't know the truth. You had no clue. So you were led to believe that somebody did Paul injustice and that they were going to take care of it. And you would assume that I probably even left the Palestine Police Department because of my wrongdoing. So when I saw this, and I don't remember if I ever told you this or not, but I'd reached out to you on Facebook through a fake Facebook account. So that was me that reached out to you. Did I ever tell you that? I don't remember if I told you that.
No, you haven't.
Okay, so that was me that reached out to you through that fake Facebook account because I wasn't sure. Like, I was totally skeptical of the situation. I was hearing for the first time that they had put this on me. I knew when Allison and I had our conversation, she was kind of trying to do that, saying that I should have never done what I did. But this was the first I was hearing of it being actually official. So I reached out to you and I was like, hey, I know Justin, he's a good dude. What has been said isn't true. Would you be willing to meet? So that's when I came to Palestine and we met in person. So let's talk about that meeting and what you heard for the first time and how that made you feel.
Well, as you stated, I came out on Facebook. Paul was sentenced to prison on February 17th, 2022. During the time prior, we were dealing with charges that were being placed on Paul, that were being dismissed. We were being talked to concerning the robbery that they stated you no longer worked at the police station because of the improper way it was documented. So we were dealing with different things with Paul. But on February the 17th, when the judge sentenced my son, we had been asked for him to snitch, to turn in people, different things. So I was angry. And I felt as though he was sentenced on February the 17th because when they first gave my son a sentence of so many years, it was about the robbery. So then when you find out, hey, my son didn't do a robbery, next it's about pills in his pocket in jail and all these different things. So, of course, I came home from court that day and I was like, Justin Carlson, you stated my son shot somebody, beat somebody over the head. He kicked, stomped, but I have this recording that says otherwise. And so I just blasted it out there to let the people know that, hey, this has nothing to do with pills in the pocket. Once my son was not searched before going into jail, this has everything to do with the detective that said my son beat and kicked someone, and then you reach out to me.
So were you pretty surprised to hear the truth of how I felt at the time? The conclusion of my investigation that they had never told you that. They never told you that, I didn't charge PJ, that I didn't implicate PJ. They never told you that. They just made it sound like, oh yeah, we're going to take care of this and we're going to deal with him, and just to kind of get you to shut up in a sense and to move on. So when we met that day, how did that make you feel hearing what you heard?
I was more angrier with them at that time because I blasted you. Even though I had the recordings, I was upset because they put something wrongdoing from them on someone else. So it made it look like you were targeting my son, when in all actuality, Allison Mitchell, Scott Holden, and Mark Harcrow had it out for Paul. And I will say Mark Cargill as well. And so whenever I met with you and I saw or listened to the truth, I was shocked because this whole time I'm thinking, Justin Carlson is the reason why my son is going through all this. In all actuality, it was not you.
So let's talk about Paul's sentencing. Why he is incarcerated now for a ridiculous 25 years. We have to back up a little bit and be transparent. Everybody goes through hard times in their life. It just happens. Everybody's different. They take to different things. They hang out with different people. But everybody goes through a hard time in their life. And so let's back up to April 13th, 2019, which was even before the shooting. So the shooting that they indicted him for happened in October of 2019. But let's go to April of 2019, just a few months before. Paul was arrested for let's talk about that arrest. He was arrested for something to do with pills. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Actually, it was we'll say April the 12th. I had a paint party, and Paul was at the paint party with us. We shut down at the Civic Center. We had to be there after midnight, so that's why it is going over into April the 13th. So roughly after midnight, Paul had just helped us clean up the Civic Center, and he was in his girlfriend's car. He was alone, and he was headed to our house, from what I understand. And he was pulled over from what they state was an expired expiration sticker, saying that they saw that 2 streets over. It's after midnight, but that was the reason for pulling him over. Crazy thing is, we stopped by my house, and on the way through, we see PJ being pulled over. We pulled up on the scene, and they told us that Paul had some marijuana pens in the car and that he would be going to jail for it because it was illegal. So supposedly he had 3 marijuana pens in the car. They take Paul to jail, and later it comes out, after he was not searched. Like, I watched the whole video. Brian Walsh let me look at it. Paul was on the side of the road. You could tell he was high. My son had recently come into an addiction of a substance of K2, which is a synthetic marijuana. It's a potpourri from what I understand. I don't know, but he had gotten addicted to it. So when they took him to jail that night, he was under the influence of the K2. They never searched my son. They took him into the jail, and later we are being told that he had party pills in his pocket. And so he goes through years of court for the party pills. At the same time, we're going through this burglary. So once they did not charge him for the burglary, and that goes away, we get an offer to do 8 years for having pills in your pocket in the facility. So it was all very, very, very conflicting and confusing. And so, yeah.
So he gets arrested for the vape pens or whatever, THC pens. That's a whole nother story. Let's start to legalize marijuana, but we'll talk about that another day. So he gets arrested for that. goes to the jail. He's obviously high because, I mean, that was a time um, in his life where he was going through some things. He had a rough relationship with his kid's mom and stuff like that. So, I mean, he had a bunch of stress and things going on. So they take him to the jail, and they didn't search him when he got out of the car. You pull up in the Sally Port, the garage. They didn't search him. They took him into jail. I guess whenever they were taking the contents out of his pocket, they found some pills in his pocket. Being a law enforcement officer, if you had anybody that was worth their salt and was a good person, they would tell you. I had several of my mentors tell me, Justin, just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should, right? You got to take some common sense into consideration. If the guy you're arresting is already high and you take him in a facility and he's got pills in his pocket, number one, my thought process, if that would have been me, I'd have been like, dang, I should have found those, number one. But number two, obviously he's under the influence of something. And so I'm not going to charge him with a felony of bringing a prohibited substance into a correctional facility, because that just, at that point, you just got to apply some common sense. You're a cop, you carry a gun, you're making life and death decisions, and you should be able to make that kind of decision. So again, that was April of 2019. Then the shooting happens in October, wrongfully indicted. Paul had never been convicted of any kind of hardcore crime. He was, I think the only other thing that he had going on was a misdemeanor charge from 2018 that he was on 18 months of probation for. And so to put it in order, 2018, he gets a misdemeanor charge. He's on 18 months of probation. 2019, he has pills in his pocket that the officer failed to find. Then a couple months later, 2019 in October, the shooting happens. He's wrongfully indicted on that. At that point, I think Paul's like, okay, maybe some of the people I'm hanging out with are, those aren't the right people. So you have a pretty big gap there from 2020 to 2022, where Paul's kind of keeping it chill, right? He's doing what he's supposed to do. Tell me about that 2-year gap.
Well, in 2 years, Paul started trying to get his life back in order. Basically, in 2 years, they drained us. We were in and out of court. It was reset. I was paying Mark Cargill, paying Bell's Buzzman. Paul was paying. He was working on the food trailer. We purchased a food trailer company business, and we were working on the food trailer, but every dime Paul made, it went to the courts. Like, he lost his job at Sanderson Farm because he had to go to court. And so basically for 2 years, we're in and out of court. One day you're going, one court date is aggravated robbery. One court date is the stolen car. One court date is taking drugs in a correctional facility. So it was just constantly $75 a week for here, $50 over there. And so you don't know what you're going to get. Then the offer comes on the table. You don't know what the offer's for. I can remember one time getting a Zoom meeting. It was Allison Mitchell. It was one of the judges, Mark Cargill and Brian Walsh, and Paul on the Zoom. Everybody was confused on the Zoom. One was thinking about the burglary. The other was thinking about the taking the drugs in the correctional facility. So we did not know what to think because they were just as confused as we were.
And I think that's pretty typical for Anderson County courts. Me, just even as a law enforcement officer, going there, and trial being set and then reset. I mean, I know things happen. Like I get that things come up and attorneys have things that happen, but just the constant back and forth can really wear on somebody. But during that 2-year period, I mean, Paul, he started working on the food truck. He stopped hanging out with these people. He didn't get in any trouble. Started going to church with you. Just started getting his life together from a few mistakes that he made. So fast forward to February 17th of 2022, he has his court date, and that's when he gets sentenced for the pills. Is that right?
Yes, he. I want to back up just a couple of months prior. He went to trial, and the judge told myself, Paul, Brian Walsh, and everyone there that he was eligible for probation because he was on a misdemeanor probation from 2018. But everyone knows that charge started as a burglary habitat. It came down to a lesser charge because he was actually living at the address. It turned out to be a family violence where he and his baby's mom had an argument and a cell phone was broke. So whenever we fast forward, we're in court and she states, Paul, you've never been in trouble. You're eligible for probation. We're going to let the jury decide on the sentencing, guilty or non-guilty, and then I will be doing your sentencing. They put a packet together for Paul for probation.
Now, you got that packet in the mail, right? Like you got a phone call or something saying that he was set for probation. Tell us about that.
Yes, he was actually sentenced to prison February the 17th of 2022. A week after Paul left to go to prison, we received his first probation letter in the mail stating that he needed to report and what dues would be due in March for probation, but he was in prison.
So let me get this straight. They said he was eligible for probation because he had no, violent charges. Anything that he was on probation for, it was a misdemeanor charge. That was downgraded because they said it was burglary, but he lived there. So they said, well, the cell phone got broke, and so we're going to do family violence. And so he said, well, I'll take the 18 months. So when they go to court for the pills in the pocket, they say that he's eligible for probation. But then how in the world did he go from that to being incarcerated?
Well, I believe it happened, and this is where we'll later get down the road and talk about Dana Goolsby. She was at the time the mayor of Palestine, Texas, and Paul had a sickness inside of the jail. He was not getting the medical attention he needed, and I had exhausted all lines of communication with the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. So I made contact with our mayor to tell her, hey, look, my son's in jail. He needs medical and nothing's happening. She reached out and they took my son to have medical. So the day of his sentencing, I want to tell you this, Justin, the judge dismissed the jury, and that night she said, Paul, you're eligible for probation. You come back, blah, blah, blah. That night, one of the juries actually reached out to me and said, hey, don't say anything, but I said your son is innocent, and others were persuaded.
And I've seen that screenshot. You actually have a screenshot of that. And for everybody listening, on my website, I have a blog where I will post some bonus content. So some of these documents that we're talking about, some of them we may post, some of them we may not, just for legal reasons. But check that after this episode, because you actually have a screenshot of that and of the juror messaging you on Facebook saying, hey, I wanted to do this, but everybody else was persuasive, so I went along with the crowd, which come on, if you feel a certain way, stand for what you believe in. Don't let people sway you into believing or just going with the flow. So you have an actual screenshot of that, and man, that's crazy. Like, you tried reaching out to that guy. What happened?
His name is Brett Enders. We were actually not friends on Facebook. Whenever he messaged me, it'll tell you you're now connected if you respond back. So I responded back. We have a long thread where he stated that he felt as though Paul was a good kid and he just got around the wrong crowd. So I immediately, the next day, I reached out to Brian Walsh and I was like, hey, this jury reached out to me, and he stated that my son was innocent, that he felt as though he was innocent and others were persuaded. Nothing ever came of that. No retrial. I was told by Brian Walsh, and I can later provide this thread of communication. He stated that the guy just basically said something. And so they never subpoenaed him to come back to court. Basically, he blocked me from Facebook after he told me he would reach out to the judge and Brian Walsh concerning how he actually felt about the trial.
That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. So after that, Paul, he gets sent to TDC. Then you get a parole pack or a probation packet. Why do you think they go from, hey, you're eligible for probation, judge making comments about giving him probation, suddenly he gets sentenced to TDC for however many years, and you can talk about that. But then you get a packet in the mail. It was obvious that that at some point conversations were had about giving him probation. What do you think happened, and how did that make you feel when you got that packet? I mean, as a mom whose kid had just been sentenced to TDC, whenever you thought he was going to get probation, and then you get a packet confirming that was on the table at some point. Talk about that. How did that make you feel, and how many years did PJ get?
First, Paul is serving a total, his total sentence time is 25 years for a non-aggravated charge. It's for a possession charge and taking pills in a correctional facility. That is what my son is facing charges for. Once I received the letter in the mail stating when Paul was supposed to have his first probation, I was angry. I'm still angry. And I feel as though, honestly, that my son is serving time because of my clapback. And when I say clapback, it's because I speak on corruption in Anderson County. I reach out to Dana for my son to have medical. And I think that I made them very upset. I am having legal issues myself with one of their friends, and that was the doctor I worked for 18 years, being the only African American there, and him terminating me. So I think a lot of this is just transpiring from me being a vocal voice, a loud voice, and teaming with people that they do not like. And so in that town, if you're not a part of the good old boys and girls club, they attack your loved ones. So I feel like this was an attack for me, but my son suffered through the attack.
And you mentioned Dana Goolsby. Man, that's a whole nother. And I'm gonna try to get Dana on the show because she's got a crazy story. And they didn't like Dana, and you spoke out against this doctor who was in the elbow rubbing club. All the elite of Palestine and Anderson County, Texas. The DA, the police chiefs, the major business owners, the doctors, the lawyers, all these people just rub elbows together. And you were vocal about it. And you think that because of that, you're saying that you think Paul is suffering because you basically were trying to take a stand. And, I think there's several of us, myself included, who have taken a stand in Palestine, and we've all suffered from it. And so I believe you're probably right about that. And the fact that how many years is Paul doing right now again?
25 years.
Okay, and so is that 25 years? Is that solely for the pills in the correctional facility?
Possession and taking it into the correctional facility.
That's wild, because if you read, if you read the statute, that's only punishable to anywhere between either a fine or 2 to 10 years. Not only that, this is where we can really identify a broken system, because you have people who have committed murder, you have people who have molested kids, hard drives full of child porn, and they get less time than PJ got for having pills in his pocket. And you got, this whole big political deal going on from January 6th, the insurrection on the Capitol. You got guys who broke in the U.S. Capitol who got 4 years, who got 6 years. And Paul's doing 25 for pills in his pocket. And that, to me, I can't wrap my mind around that. And I can't imagine. I can't even sit here and begin to. This whole thing makes me mad because it should have never happened. It all started with that indictment, and none of this should have ever happened. And I'm not even related to Paul, so I can't imagine as a mom how that makes you feel. And how does it make you feel?
You're angry, bitter, afraid. You feel like a part of you is missing, even though I'm thankful that my son is not deceased, because I feel like they would have went through any extreme to get Paul. But you're just disappointed with the judicial system. They're here they take an oath to protect and serve, and they end up being part of the problem. They throw our young men in prison, and they take them away from the children. My son has 2 sons. One he has not met outside of the prison system. And so it's disappointing, because I don't feel like my son deserved to be in prison doing 25 years on a non-aggravated charge. My son has met child molesters in prison. He's met murderers in prison, rapists. And he just states that it's not fair. Yes, he has admitted to having an addiction, but where is rehabilitation? Where was the Christian center that me and my family found for Paul to attend, an all-men's Christian center in Dallas? They declined it. We went to Allison Mitchell, myself and my mother, before she passed, and we went and begged for rehabilitation, but this was their rehabilitation for my son. Almost 3 years later is a 25-year sentence.
I have good news to share about this case. At the time of the initial recording with Nitra, PJ had not gone before the parole board just yet. He was awaiting his review. I, along with several others, had written the parole board advocating for PJ's release. This was the first time I'd ever written the parole board in all of my years advocating for someone's release. But as of April 7th, 2023, PJ was approved for parole following the completion of an in-house program. I know Nitra is overjoyed, as well as I am happy that this boy gets a second chance, which is the right thing, as he should have never even gone to prison in the first place. But I wanted to share this with you all before releasing this episode, that this story actually has a happy ending for PJ and Nitra. As mentioned during the interview with Nitra, there was an audio clip from a phone conversation that was recorded between Nietzsche and I. Nietzsche recorded the phone conversation. It was told to me by Leon Owens that PJ knew where the gun was. Come to find out, Leon was lying. But this was a portion of our conversation where I was asking Nietzsche if she knew that PJ knew where the gun was and if he knew where the gun was. But this is where I tell them that PJ will not be charged for the crime in any form or fashion, whether he knew or didn't know where the gun was. It was determined PJ did not know where the gun was, but this was the portion of the audio that I indicated that I would play later, and here it is.
Maybe if PJ doesn't have it, but he knows where it's at, all he's got to do is tell me, and at this very moment, I'm still willing to let that go and not charge PJ. But
So if PJ don't say, I know where this gun is, he gonna be charged?
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not gonna charge PJ. I just want PJ to come forward and tell me, hey, this is where it's at. That way we can get it. And if he knows where it's at, he's got to tell me. That way we can get it. And he can walk away from this situation.
Sir, can I say?
This is Failing Justice.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We want to let our listeners know that there's a way that you can help support our cause. If you head over to our website, www.thisisfailingjustice.com, scroll all the way to the bottom of the homepage, and there you will find a donation link. Any amount you can donate will help us further our mission and reach more people. We believe that it is important to keep spreading the word about the issues in our justice system, and that it's crucial to keep fighting for change. With your support, we can do just that.